Palestinian Liberation Organization backs ICC warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant. The United States Senate rejects a bill to block weapons transfers to Israel. And the Arab League criticizes US veto blocking Gaza ceasefire draft resolution. It's almost 8 p.m. Car local time and you're watching Qnews. We begin today's bulletin with the latest developments in Gaza. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and former Defense Minister Yoav Gallant over war crimes in Gaza. The ICC cited reasonable grounds to believe they oversaw attacks on civilians and used starvation as a weapon. The court clarified that Israel's acceptance of its jurisdiction is unnecessary and stated that the disclosure of the warrants serves the interests of victims. Additionally, charges also included murder, prosecution, and other inhumane acts. Palestinian Liberation Organization Executive Committee member Wassel Abu Yusuf has welcomed the ICC's arrest warrants for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and ex-defense chief Gallant. Abu Yusuf called them overdue but crucial. He emphasized their significant amid 411 days of genocide against Palestinians, stressing the importance of prosecuting war criminals and highlighting the decision as a step in the right direction for justice. And for further analysis of International Criminal Court arrest warrants, we're joined from Paris by international law professor Majid Boudin. A very good day and welcome to Qnews. How can the International Criminal Court implement its decision against Netanyahu and Gallant?
Well, this pattern is impossible, and the International Criminal Court doesn't have soldiers and police, but they rely, under the Rome Convention, they rely on states, that they are part of the convention, the Statute of Rome, to make the arrest and to deliver the arrested person to The Hague, to the headquarters of the court. So all states they have, which has signed and ratified the convention, they have the obligation to make the arrest as soon as the person is on their land or they are flying over the territory.
Sir, will the International Criminal Court implement the decisions issued today, or is there no new development going to take place?
No, they can implement it. There is nothing which can prevent implementing it, even though Netanyahu can appeal the decision or make a recourse, but still the title is enforceable immediately. So from now, he could be under any decision to arrest him.
Okay, sir, can the decisions of the International Criminal Court be used to pressure the Security Council to impose a ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon as soon as possible or make it imminent?
Oh, it's important that one of the major players in this war and who is now convicted by severe charges and that he is banned and he's prevented now from traveling in the countries where he could develop his activities, so the restriction of his movements are essential to down further his criminal activities. Because now the prosecutor has established evidence that Netanyahu and Gallant has made are liable, and they have to be examined for these heavy charges, which are heavy gross crimes. So the views of the world will be changing now towards Netanyahu and Gallant.
Exactly, sir. Sir, could the International Criminal Court's decisions against Israel lead to a change in the situation in Gaza and Lebanon?
Of course, it will have an impact. It could then have an impact because now there is a signal, a very, very strong signal, that nobody can commit these kinds of crimes without being prosecuted or without being made liable and accountable. So it's not because somebody is the chief of state or chief of government that he can do whatever he wishes. Now, the limits are there, and they are strongly addressed, and they are strongly spelled out. So it's a very important warning that and the message is that it cannot continue, and even that he must be accountable for that.
Okay, sir, are you, finally, before we wrap up this segment, are you optimistic about this decision, sir?
No, it's a very important decision. It's not a political decision, it's a legal decision. It's a judicial decision, and the decision has a very important psychological effect, and it has also I think Netanyahu is now thinking about what he has done and that he cannot escape from international justice.
That was international law professor Majid Bulletin. Thank you, sir, for your informative knowledge and your insights. And we move on with the news, where the United States Senate has rejected legislation that would have halted the transfer of certain U.S. weapons to Israel. 3 draft resolutions introduced by Senator Bernie Sanders aim to address concerns over the ongoing human rights crisis in Gaza. These measures sought to limit U.S. arms sales to Israel as part of a broader effort to hold Israel accountable for its actions in the region, but were ultimately voted down.
Senator responded, present. The motion is not agreed to.
A series of Israeli airstrikes this evening on the El Masawi area in southern Gaza have killed several Palestinian civilians and left others injured. Palestinian media reports say Israeli fighter jets targeted the area, which houses displaced people. Airstrikes also hit the western parts of Beit Lahia in northern Gaza, while Israeli soldiers detonated several residential buildings in the Jabalia refugee camp. At least 66 Palestinians have been killed in a new massacre committed by the Israeli occupation forces in northern Gaza. At dawn, occupation warplanes bombed an entire residential block near Kamel Adwan Hospital, killing 66 civilians and injuring more than 100 others. In the aftermath, medical staff struggled to treat the victims due to a shortage of rescue crews. Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul Ghait has criticized the U.S. veto at the United Nations, which blocked the Gaza ceasefire draft resolution backed by 40 nations. Abul Ghait said the veto enables Israel's deadly campaign, including forced displacement and starvation in Gaza. He also remarked that the veto exposes the UN's failure to address regional conflicts and advancing plans from the Israeli far right to further annex and resettle Palestinian territory.
14 votes in favor, 1 vote against.
Palestinian medical authorities have announced that Israeli military operations in Gaza killed 13 people and wounded 85 in the past 24 hours. This came as an Israeli attack targeted the Sheikh Radwan neighborhood in northern Gaza City, killing 6 Palestinians and injuring at least 14 others. In addition, 5 Palestinians were killed and 15 others were injured by Israeli bombings in Beit Lahia in northern Gaza. Gaza-based health authorities have since announced that the death toll from Israeli attacks on the Gaza Strip has climbed to over 43,900, with over 104,000 others wounded. Four Palestinians have been killed and others were injured after occupation warplanes bombed the city of Qnews. Medical sources reported that the occupation forces targeted a group of citizens in the Al-Qarin area southeast of Qnews. This came after an Israeli airstrike hit the southern part of Al-Masawi yesterday, killing more than 7 people. The Commissioner General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian Refugees, Philippe Lazzarini, has confirmed that the civil system in Gaza has been completely destroyed. On social media, Lazzarini stated that 80% of the Gaza Strip are high-risk areas, noting that northern Gaza is suffering under a stifling siege, that people have not received humanitarian aid for more than 40 days. He reported that residents have no safe haven and are searching for the most basic resources.
The clock is ticking. Basically, it's a 3-month deadline. I have shared.
Jordanian Foreign Minister Ayman al-Safadi has emphasized the International Criminal Court decisions must be respected for Palestinian justice. Speaking alongside EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell, al-Safadi highlighted talks focused on alleviating civilian suffering in Gaza, especially in the north, and praised the EU's efforts to support Gaza and address the humanitarian crisis. Borrell affirmed that the ICC's arrest orders for Netanyahu and Gallant should be enforced and criticized Israel's obstruction of humanitarian aid, stressing the EU's commitment to exposing atrocities against Gaza's children. As Israeli airstrikes intensify in the 410th day of the conflict, Gaza faces a deepening humanitarian crisis. Bombardments on residential areas, medical facilities and infrastructure have left dozens dead, including women and children.
The situation in Gaza has worsened as Israeli airstrikes continue into the 410th day of conflict. Bombardments have targeted residential areas, infrastructure, and medical facilities, resulting in dozens of casualties, including women and children. Kamal Adwan Hospital is struggling with severe shortages of resources, which is compounding the humanitarian crisis. Over 80% of Gaza's population is displaced, living in overcrowded shelters with limited access to basic necessities like food, water, and sanitation. Efforts to rescue survivors are being hampered by relentless airstrikes and power outages. This escalation follows a U.S. veto at the UN Secretary Council against the resolution for an immediate ceasefire, sparking criticism from international and regional actors. Many accused the U.S. for enabling continued Israeli aggression. Diplomatic initiatives to halt the violence remain stagnant. Regionally, protests have erupted condemning the violence and the U.S. veto. Hezbollah, expressing solidarity with Gaza, is engaging in clashes with Israeli occupation forces in southern Lebanon, escalating tensions further. Amid calls for a ceasefire, international efforts to mediate remain fractured, leaving little hope for an immediate resolution to the crisis. Humanitarian toll continues to climb as Gaza's residents endure immense suffering under the unrelenting assault.
كل المستهدفين هن مدنيين. وضع شيء مرعب، شيء بيخوف.
United States envoy Amos Hoxton has arrived in Israel for Lebanon ceasefire talks, where he will present Hezbollah's response to the United States draft proposal, having recently noted positive progress in ceasefire negotiations. Hoxton today met with Israel's Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer. Discussions continue with Israeli political security cabinet set to review update on the negotiations. An Israeli airstrike has hit a building in Beirut's southern suburbs. Several strikes have been heard in the suburbs since the early morning. Lebanese media reported that Israeli warplanes violently pounded the Dahya region of Haret Harik with 2 missiles. Israeli occupation forces have continued their attacks on several areas of the Lebanese city of Tyre. The Lebanese Health Ministry has announced that yesterday's Israeli airstrikes on the town of Ma'araka in Tyre left 13 dead and 44 others injured, while airstrikes on the town of Sha'ataya resulted in 3 deaths and 5 other injuries. Casualties count remains a preliminary as rescue operations and damage assessments continue to heavily bombarded areas. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Skarova has stated that Russia is open to realistic peace initiatives on Ukraine. Skarova clarified that this position requires that Russia's interests and the ground situation are accounted for. Moscow expressed gratitude to countries seeking to mediate a settlement and reaffirmed its willingness to engage in talks aimed at resolving the ongoing conflict. United States Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has explained the decision to provide anti-personnel landmines to Ukraine, emphasizing that they would be safer than the landmines that Ukraine is currently making. Austin, speaking at the ASEAN Defense Ministries meeting, noted that Russia's strategy now involves clearing paths for mechanized forces with dismounted troops. Austin added that American landmines offer more control over detonation, timing, which would slow Russian advances.
They're fabricating their own anti-personnel land mines.
The United States has reportedly reopened its embassy in Kyiv after having shut it for a couple of hours. The embassy was temporarily closed late on Wednesday due to what it called a threat of a significant air attack. This closure came a day after Ukraine used American-made missiles to strike a target inside Russia. China's foreign ministry has expressed willingness to engage in discussions with relevant parties to protect international submarine infrastructure security. Spokesperson Lin Jian commented in a response to inquiries regarding a Chinese vessel in Danish waters. This followed investigations by Finland and Sweden into severe telecommunications cables in the Baltic Sea. As Danish authorities monitored the Ideal ship Yipeng 3, Lin was unable to provide specific details. World stocks have been a mixed performance as Bitcoin soared to record highs, surpassing $97,000 in the United States. The S&P 500 was 0.1% higher. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rose 0.1%, and the Nasdaq Composite gained 0.1%. In Europe, France's CAC 40 lost nearly 0.2%. Germany's DAX rose nearly 0.2%, and Britain's FTSE 100 added 0.2%. Moving on to Asia, where Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 shed 0.9%. South Korea's Kospi declined less than 0.1%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng dipped 0.5%, and Shanghai Composite rose less than 0.1%. Bitcoin rose to a record high above $97,000 as investors bet a friendlier U.S. regulator approach to cryptocurrencies under President-elect Donald Trump. Bitcoin prices topped $98,000 for the first time and were last up around 4%. This marks almost daily all-time highs since U.S. presidential election results. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on delegations at the COP29 to soften hard lines and compromise to reach a deal. He also remarked the finance is at the center of this COP.
But from now on, what matters is not what was the initial position of each party. What now matters is how to find a compromise that allows for an ambitious result in relation to the new global goal, because finance is in the center of this COP, but at the same time to take into account the concerns of all other countries in relation to the different aspects that are relevant for the future of our battle against climate change.
That brings us to the end of our news bulletin. Here's what we have been covering. Palestine Liberation Organization backs ICC warrants for Netanyahu and Gallant. United States Senate rejects bill to block weapons transfers to Israel. And the Arab League criticizes US veto blocking Gaza ceasefire draft resolution. This concludes our news bulletin for the hour. Don't forget to follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram and TikTok at Qnews Egypt. And to stay informed, thank you very much for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Qnews.